Hi, my name is Catherine Gomez and this is my presentation on sheet metal. The term sheet metal refers to any metal that can be formed into flat pieces of varying thickness. It is simply metal that has been flattened or coiled into strips for individual manufacturing processes. Alloy is stretched out into a sheet, forming the sheet metal. Sheet metal has numerous uses in the industrial world. For this reason, it is an essential part of industry as a whole. By knowing the many types of sheet metal and how they are formed and react, architects will be able to make an informed decision in deeming what is necessary for the job. Sheet metal is formed by working metal into flat and thin pieces. Sheet metal is categorized by its alloy, thickness and hardness, method of manufacturing, tensile strength, and quality. It varies in its thickness, which is quantified by its measure known as its gauge. If the sheet metal is thin, then the gauge number will be larger. If the gauge is small, then the sheet metal will be thicker. Most sheet metal commonly found in today's market is either in coiled strips or flat sheet pieces. Coils are made with continuous running of sheet metal into a roll slitter. With the use of slide feeds, gripper feeds, and roll feeds, the sheet metal is fed into the slitter and cut to the desired length. There are many different types of sheet metals. The following are the most common. Cold rolled steel, which is pressed into a sheet in a cold state at the steel foundry. It has more homogeneous composition than hot rolled steel, which allows better heat conductivity and is easier to machine. Hot rolled steel is formed into a sheet in a molten state and rolled flat while it is still hot. Hot rolled steel is usually of less quality than cold rolled steel and is more difficult to machine due to the variable composition in the metal. Stainless steel is an alloy-based chromium and steel and is categorized by its resistance to corrosion. Stainless steel is much harder than regular steel and is not easy to work with in some respects. Aluminum sheet metal is a mixture of aluminum with other metals, often being copper, zinc, manganese, silicone, or magnesium. Sheet metal forming process is done on a press, and parts are formed between two dies. The die at the top is called a punch. First, we will discuss the steps involved in rolled steel forming process. Bending includes bending sheet metal for creating the metal components. Short lengths of the metal are bent with the help of dies, while press brakes are used to press the longer lengths of the metal. Repeated bending is also used for complex shapes and is done through sets of rollers. A series of bending operations are done on the sheet metal for roll forming. There are roll stations at different increments apart so the sheet metal can be gradually rolled into the desired shape. When the sheet is forced through roller dies, the sheet bends and deforms. For more intricate designs, the sheet metal often goes through a spinning process. The sheet is cut into a disc or a tube and revolved at high speed. A roller then gradually presses the sheet against a mold called a spoon in an upward direction of the base. Deep drawing sheet metal is used for items that need to have a cavity made in the metal form. It is performed with a punch and die, creating a cup-like shape. The sheet metal workpiece, called a blank, is placed over the die opening. A blank holder that surrounds the punch applies force to the entire surface of the blank, holding the sheet metal work flat against the die. The punch then proceeds toward the blank and forces the sheet metal into the die cavity, forming its shape. Meanwhile, the pressure pad removes any wrinkles that form in the metal. This process requires calculations to determine the allowed clearances between the cutting operations. Stretch forming is a method of forcing the sheet metal into permanently curved shapes of predetermined contour. The sheet metal is stretched and bent simultaneously over a die. This process is formed on a stretch press, which in which a piece of sheet metal is securely gripped along its edges by gripping jaws. The gripping jaws are each attached to the carriage and it's pulled down by pneumatic or hydraulic force to stretch the sheet. The die, which is a solid contoured piece, is pressed against the sheet. As the sheet is gripped tightly along the edges, the carriages are pulled down while the die is driven into the sheet and deforms into a new shape. Over the years, sheet metal manufacturing has become an important resource in creating all kinds of items. Historically, sheet metal was used for plate armor worn by cavalry, and it continues to have many decorative uses. Today, sheet metal is used from everything from automobiles to airplanes, roofs and rain gutters, and even computers and electronics. At Huntington Ingalls Shipyard at Pascagoula, some of the United States Navy's most impressive warships are still using sheet metal in most of their building components. There are also many viable artistic uses for sheet metal. During the Walter Anderson Art Festival, artists have showcased their sheet metal artwork. Sheet metal has so many capabilities, and depending on the type of metal used and fabrication, it can be used to create almost anything imaginable. By continuing to work with sheet metal, engineers and inventors can create more ways to innovate and make it a viable and formidable product in the present and future manufacturing world. Thank you.